Let's learn a little bit more about these fast reactors that you've talked about. In terms of land space, because you say they're much smaller. In terms of land space, how much do they need, and what is that in comparison to a traditional reactor?
So it depends on the size of the reactor. So our reactor, which I said is up to about 15 megawatt electric, we're looking at less than a half an acre to build the plant on. So not much. The Vogtle 3 and 4 plants, which are 1,100 gigawatt electric, I don't know how many acres they need, but it's not a great deal. Okay. Certainly not compared to, say, the amount of land you would need for comparable wind or solar.
Of course, yeah. Is there restrictions about how close you can be to homes and...
That all comes into the environmental considerations. So there's no firm restrictions on how close you can be. So research reactors at universities are sitting in cities in many cases.
Huh. Hadn't even thought about research reactors.
Oh yeah, they're there.
But I guess if it's safe for people to work at these, is there any increased risk to somebody working?
No.
Zero?
No.
Yeah. So if you can work there, you can live near. I mean, some people won't want to live near one.
Yeah, they've been, most of the reactors in the United States tend to be built in less populated areas, but that's not going to be the case necessarily moving forward.
Okay, so in terms of your design, it goes up to 15?
We're up to 15 megawatt electric.
Do you have a single design that has a range of output it can do, or is it multiple designs?
So right now we're focusing on kind of a single design, but you're looking at what the customer wants. We're looking at what the market needs.
What does 15 megawatts mean? Like, how many people can that provide power for?
Well, so the average home in the United States uses about 1.2 kilowatts. So 15 megawatts, I'd have to do the math because I'm not, so what? 15 megawatts, 15,000 divided by 1.2. So somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15,000 homes.
Okay. So you'd need multiple in every city?
Yeah, so we're not necessarily, our reactor's not necessarily going to be used to power a large city. Our reactor is going to be used by different customers that need something. So let's use Bitcoin as a good example. You have, and I'm going to refer to them generically as data centers because it's computationally intensive. So you have a certain amount of power that you need there. A reactor like ours could potentially supply all of that power that you need. Data centers need varying amounts of power. And so depending on the company and what their desires are and what their needs are, a reactor like ours could fit that. Also smaller locations where you may, remote locations, for example, where you bring in diesel fuel that use less power could be powered by us. Military bases are another good example.
Okay, so your customers aren't really, it seems like you're servicing more the private sector, and you would suit, maybe Google could be a customer.
Absolutely, something like that. So you have the large utilities like Southern Company that's building the 2 Vogtle plants. So they provide power to everyone as a whole. You're seeing a lot of companies now that want to look at securing their own power. And so not be relying upon the grid. You're seeing the Department of Defense thinking about that for military bases as well. So not being reliant upon the grid, being self-sustaining, and companies like ours with our 15 megawatt reactor could provide that power.
And I guess someone like Tesla who've moved to Texas, there was a big issue in Texas a year ago, was it?
No, a couple of years ago.
A couple of years ago.
You're talking about the winter storm. Yep.
So I guess they'll be saying, well, we could de-risk this for us. Is it cost effective for them as well?
So our machine is going to be able to be cost effective relative to what's currently provided. So we also are approaching this from a unique perspective of a build, own, operate model. So we're going to build the reactors, operate them, and then sell power. That's a little bit different than the other companies. But at the end of the day, all of the companies, nuclear companies, are developing machines that will be cost effective.
So say if it was a Tesla, they wouldn't buy the reactor from you, they would buy the power output from the reactor.
In our case, yes.
In your case, yes.
In another case, they would probably could buy the power directly from somebody else, and they have another person that operates the reactor.
Can you talk about how much one of these costs to construct?
No, not really. It's hard for me to answer that question at the moment.
Like I've got zero. I don't know if we're talking about 100 million, a billion, 10 billion.
So for something like small reactors, micro reactors as they're called, less than 50 megawatt electric, you're going to be looking in the hundreds of millions.
Yeah, we should get one, Danny.
Something like the Vogel plants are in the billions.
These are private nuclear reactors for private businesses. Does anything like this exist now, or is everything just large-scale reactors providing the grid?
Right now in the United States, it's large-scale reactors providing the grid. You have a lot of research reactors, small reactors that are operating at universities and national laboratories. We do, of course, the military, the Navy, has microreactors that are powering its ships, aircraft carriers, and submarines.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's a whole new business model.
Mm-hmm. It is. Well, and you're seeing this because of the climate conversation, the climate change, the urgency associated with that is driving companies to look at new solutions. They need to decarbonize their operations. The oil sector needs to decarbonize its operations. There's still going to be a need for oil going forward, no doubt about that. But they need to decarbonize the manner in which they extract that oil out of the ground and they process it. And so nuclear can do that too.
Yeah, I mean, we still need oil for planes, but if we can get to a point where we're not burning oil for...
You're still going to need it for things like plastics and stuff like that.
Yeah, but I think it's getting away from burning oil to power the grid. Mm-hmm. That kind of thing seems very wasteful.
Well, and there's not oil... I mean, to be honest, oil's not used a great deal for powering the grid, certainly not in the U.S. I mean, that's coal, natural gas, wind, solar, hydro, nuclear.
I guess if we get away from coal as well, and natural gas.
Coal is dropping. Natural gas is, so right now in the U.S., 20% of the electricity is nuclear, about 20% of it's renewables, and that's a combination of...
this is the UK. There may be something like this for the US, but I don't know.
Yeah, there is. So you're looking, let me see here. 18% is other sources. So you're 13% nuclear, 47% renewable. So in the US, we're 20% renewables, 20% nuclear, and then the remainder is split between coal and natural gas.
We've got a lot of transfers there as well, though. So I guess probably the stuff from France is nuclear, you'd imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, and for us, we do import. So states like New York will import from Canada, but for the most part, we generate what we have.
I mean, 13% nuclear. What would the definition of renewable be? No waste?
I mean, I don't know what that would be, and especially not in their context. I don't know what they mean.
Well, so renewables have a tendency to mean wind, solar, hydroelectric, or maybe even biomass. It's unfortunate. Nuclear is carbon-free, just like those other energy sources are.
Yeah.
We should all be treated the same. And what we're seeing in the United States now is finally you're seeing legislation like the Inflation Reduction Act that treat all of them the same. So looking at production tax credits that cover clean energy sources, not renewables.
See, some would argue it's not clean because of the nuclear waste, which we'll get to. But
this is actually a good way to put in context the gigawatt hours, because the current demand in the UK is 40 gig. So it's like 5 times the amount of power that the UK demands right now will be coming online in nuclear. Is that right?
Huh. No, 4 times.
4 times.
So your demand is 30 gigawatts, 40 gigawatts, and I said right now in the U.S. we're generate about 90 gigawatts with nuclear.
Right.
So we're generating considerably more than what your country needs as a whole.
Yeah, but I think charts like this are misleading. I think charts like this are not helping us because the term renewable. I mean, I don't know if you could argue that nuclear is renewable, but maybe you could certainly argue renewable's green. You can definitely argue zero carbon, and I think that would be better. Fossil fuel or carbon, zero carbon. What would biomass be considered? Is that low carbon, or is that just?
I really don't know.
Well, I think I'm not an expert on it, but I think the idea is you have biomass material that had captured carbon, and then when you burn it, you're releasing carbon, so you're neutral,
right.
Carbon neutral.
Yeah, so you probably just want to have carbon, zero carbon. I don't know. It needs to be less emotion. This is emotive. It's fossil fuels is a motive because they've been demonized. Renewables is a motive because it's like it's for environmentalists, and other sources is just like is confused. Whereas if this was a practical chart based on the goals of decarbonizing the world, then you would just want to say, you just want to separate them from carbon negative to carbon to zero carbon.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And within that, you could do different designations because you're seeing right now also moving away from coal to natural gas is that's a carbon reduction. So natural gas tends to be less carbon emitting than coal does.